So about 15 years ago, I guess, when I started coming up with these concepts, before I even had the names for them, like the names I use, relationship religiosity, which we'll talk about in a different episode, or synergistic religion, I was beginning to float some of these ideas about religion not being about factual history or factual science and things like that, or factual claims, and more about meaning and myth and our place in the world and feeling it out, and this more elastic, in certain ways deeper but less rigid and solid type of truth. And I had pushback from quite a number of friends and colleagues. I remember one who was hitting at me hard with the what is it? What is it? What do these things matter? What do these stories matter? What do these rules matter? What do these identity things matter if it's not true? And true in that limited, specific sense, like a scientific truth. So I said to him, "Let me tell you a story from the Talmud." He knew the story, of course, but I wanted to make a point. So I said, "There's a story that Rabbi Akiva, who's one of the great rabbis found in the Mishnah, during the Hadrianic persecution, he was teaching Torah. He was teaching Torah among the Judeans when that was forbidden. And Pappos, his friend Pappos, says to him, 'Akiva, what are you doing? You're going to get yourself killed. Just stop.' And Akiva said, 'Pappos, the fox said to the fish, the fishermen are coming and they're bringing their nets. Why don't you come out of the water and onto the land? And that way you'll evade the fishermen's nets.' And the fish said, 'Look, fox, if I stay in the water, I might get caught by the fishermen. But if I leave the water, I'm a goner, for sure. So I'm going to take my chances here.' Now, as the story goes, Rabbi Akiva's point was clearly that for him, for the Jews, Torah was their life. It was their identity. It was who they were. Without the Torah, they were gone. Now, he might get caught teaching it. That's true, right? That's the net and the fishermen, that's the Romans, right? They may come. He might get caught. He might get killed. But without it, they all disappear. Now, there's a punchline to the story later on where both Pappos and Akiva are in prison to be executed by the Romans. And Akiva, of course, was caught teaching Torah. And Pappos was caught, who knows doing what. Maybe not even anything illegal. Maybe just because he was a Jew, or maybe just because he looked at a Roman guard funny, who knows. And Pappos had this line, said, "Woe is to me who was caught for nothing, Dvarim b'Telim. But how lucky for you, Rabbi Akiva, that you were caught for words of Torah. At least your death has meaning. Mine is coming anyway, like you said," right? That's the subtext, like you said, but it's meaningless. Let's go back to the part of the story where Akiva tells him about the fox and the fish. However, Pappos supposedly digested that. If Pappos had responded, this is what I asked my friend. Imagine Pappos had responded and said, "Akiva, you are a liar. Fish don't talk." Now, we all know that's a ridiculous response. Akiva wasn't actually claiming that a fox spoke to a fish. He was using a parable, right? Back then, you think of the time of Aesop and all that as a classic animal parallel to make a point, just like the book Animal Farm in our days. So we all understand that if Pappos had said that, that would have been silly. He would have been missing the point. Akiva actually did not say anything untrue. Now, Pappos could have debated whether Torah is that important, whether Judaism is that important, whether the Jewish people, whether it matters if they survive as a people or as a religion or only as individual humans living. You could debate the point of what Rabbi Akiva said. But to debate about foxes and fishes talking would be silly. So my friend agreed. And I said, "So now I'm going to tell you something else. There was no Pappos. That story is written hundreds of years later in the Talmud. It never happened. Pappos and Akiva never had that conversation, and Pappos is a fictional character. is the story not true? Or is it still true? Let me unpack that. The claim of the story, just like Akiva's claim in the story about the fox and the fish, the claim of the Talmud with Rabbi Akiva and Pappos is that the soul of a people, to keep the soul of a people is so important that it is worth risking a life, because without it, the people dies. Now again, you could debate that question. A humanist might say, no, individuality of nations or cultures or religions or doesn't matter. And some might say, no, it's very, very important. Ethnic markers and religious markers and philosophical convictions and all is very important. All that. It's the same truth claim as the fable. My point is, the story is itself a fable, and it has the same truth claim, and the same thing happens. If someone were to say, you know what, I don't believe in the Talmud because it makes up stories about rabbis. Akiva existed historically, but this incident is a fictional writing. If someone were to say that and say, therefore, the Talmud is not true, it makes stuff up, they're missing the point. And this is what I want to say of the larger thing about religion and about myth in general. The point of the story, very much like fiction, it's a little different. It works a little differently than just plain old fiction, which is written consciously to be fiction, as opposed to myth, which is written as a kind of meaning-making, larger thing. And we'll talk about that more another time. But if you think of it that way, it holds very, very deep truths in the ways that it expresses these stories or these accounts or these myths or these sometimes even laws. We'll talk about laws at some point. All these things are ways of trying to tap into deeper truths. And if we shrink it, if we get limited and say, no, this has to fit into like the eye of a needle, as they say, this has to fit into that. This has to be threaded just like a scientific claim or a mathematical formula or a historical proof, then yes, you lose it. But did you really ever get it? Just like if Pappos had said, there is no fish, you wouldn't get it. If we say there is no Pappos, we don't get it. And the same comes with Adam and Eve and many other such stories in our traditions.